Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Young and the Restless channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The walls of Genoa City were beginning to close in once again, and at the center of the chaos stood a man who could not even remember the monster everyone believed him to be. On the surface, Matt Clark looked broken, confused, and dangerously lost, wandering through fragments of memory like shadows flickering across a shattered mirror. He knew only two things for certain. His name was Matt Clark, and for reasons he could not understand, both Noah Newman and Victor Newman despised him with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Every other piece of his identity remained buried beneath the fog in his mind, hidden somewhere behind the violence, betrayal, and fear that seemed to follow him everywhere he went. There was one brief flash this week, one violent image clawing its way back into his consciousness, Nick Newman's fists slamming into his face. But even that memory came without context, without names, without explanation, like a scene torn from a movie he no longer remembered starring in. And while Matt drifted helplessly through that confusion, someone else immediately realized exactly how valuable he had become. The moment Phyllis Summers understood who she was dealing with, the gears in her mind began turning faster than ever, because suddenly she wasn't just looking at a damaged stranger anymore. She was staring at leverage powerful enough to shake the Newman empire itself. Phyllis wasted no time taking control of the situation, quietly hiding Matt away in a room at the Genoa City Athletic Club like a secret weapon waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Her warning to him not to wander off carried far more weight than simple concern, because she knew the entire city was hunting for him, and whoever controlled Matt controlled the next move in a very dangerous game. The tension escalated quickly as Phyllis marched straight toward the Newman ranch alongside Michael Baldwin, armed with the kind of confidence only she could carry into Victor Newman's territory. There, standing face to face with one of the most powerful men in Genoa City, Phyllis dangled Matt Clark like bait in front of a shark. In exchange for Matt's location, she demanded freedom. Specifically, that Victor put an end to Christine Blair Romalotti's prosecution against her for stealing Newman Enterprises using the fake AI-generated evidence Victor himself had created. The entire negotiation dripped with manipulation, desperation, and cold strategy because Victor needed Matt badly enough to bargain, especially with Nick spiraling dangerously out of control. While Nick ran through the city fueled by rage and opioids, fantasizing about killing Matt and somehow passing it off as self-defense, Victor could already see disaster looming on the horizon. Even Victor, a man capable of ruthless decisions, understood exactly what Nick was plotting: premeditated murder. And no matter how much hatred existed for Matt Clark, murder was still murder. Victor agreed to Phyllis's terms, at least partially, but there was another condition hanging heavily in the air. He wanted Newman Enterprises returned to him as well. The entire situation felt like a high-stakes poker game where nobody at the table truly trusted the others. Yet everyone needed something badly enough to keep playing. Deep down, it already seemed inevitable that Phyllis would never be allowed to permanently keep control of the Newman Company, and she likely knew it too. But Phyllis Summers has never been the kind of woman to walk away empty-handed. Somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, there was probably a deal waiting to happen. Victor regains Matt and his company, while Phyllis escapes prison and walks away with enough money to cushion the fall. The details of that arrangement still remain uncertain, but what seemed far more shocking was what might happen afterward. Under normal circumstances, someone like Matt Clark would either vanish into prison or end up dead after crossing the Newman family. That is exactly what viewers would expect as May sweeps approached their explosive conclusion. Everything appeared to be building toward Victor reclaiming control and Matt finally paying the price. But then came a revelation that completely changed the direction of the story. Behind the scenes, a clue emerged that hinted this nightmare was far from over. On May 6th, Michelle Stafford posted a backstage video from Hair and Makeup at The Young and the Restless, casually documenting another filming day. At first, it looked ordinary, the kind of behind-the-scenes moment soap fans see all the time. But then Michelle turned the camera and revealed Roger Howarth sitting beside her. With a grin full of implication, she announced there were many, many things to come. In that single moment, the future of Matt Clark's storyline suddenly cracked wide open. Since the show films roughly 4 weeks ahead, Roger Howarth clearly was not leaving anytime soon. Matt Clark was not disappearing after May sweeps. He was staying. And when Michelle added the caption, "Let the games begin," it felt less like a playful tease and more like a warning to the entire audience that something much bigger was about to unfold. The chemistry between these two actors already carries history for longtime soap viewers, especially those who watched General Hospital, where Michelle Stafford's Nina Reeves once shared a complicated romance with Roger Howarth's Franco Baldwin, a man who himself walked the line between serial killer and redeemed soul. That history matters because soap operas thrive on chemistry, redemption arcs, and dangerous emotional entanglements. Suddenly, the possibility of Matt and Phyllis becoming something more no longer felt random. It felt planned. Meanwhile, the danger surrounding Nick Newman continued intensifying by the day. Victor directly ordered him not to kill Matt, but Nick's addiction was already pulling him into darker territory. This week, viewers watched him secretly buying more opioid pills from a dealer in the park, a chilling sign that his control was slipping again. Nick has always been impulsive, emotional, and capable of explosive violence even at his best, but now he was spiraling under the weight of addiction, betrayal, and fury. His anger toward Adam Newman only made things worse after Adam exposed Nick's relapse to Victor. Yet in the middle of all that darkness came one surprisingly emotional moment. Nick embracing Victor and admitting he wanted to get clean. For a brief instant, there was vulnerability there, a glimpse of the man Nick wants to become instead of the man addiction keeps dragging him back into becoming. But promises mean very little until rehab becomes reality, and until then, everyone around him remains in danger. It feels increasingly likely that Phyllis will ultimately hand Matt over to save herself, only for Nick's reckless vigilante plan to spiral catastrophically out of control. Victor warned him, Adam warned him, nearly everyone told him not to do this. Only Noah Newman stood beside Nick's plan, blindly supporting the idea of violent justice, and that support may end up becoming one of the biggest mistakes of all. The deeper this situation unfolds, the more complicated the legal reality becomes. Despite everything Matt has been accused of, the truth is that Genoa City authorities currently have almost nothing solid to hold him on. Before fleeing to Las Vegas, Matt had already been released from custody because no charges could legally stick. And after leaving town, any crimes tied to Vegas exist almost entirely in shadows and accusations. Sharon, Newman, and Noah went to the old gas station voluntarily, meaning there are no witnesses placing Matt there in any criminal context. Nobody actually saw him cause the explosion. The evidence is paper thin. Sienna may claim she witnessed events unfold, but her credibility is weakened by the fact that she violently attacked Matt herself. In fact, the only crime investigators might realistically prove involves Sienna smashing Matt in the head with a rock. There could be DNA evidence linking her to the assault. There could be blood evidence proving Matt was the victim in that moment. Suddenly, the supposed villain begins looking far more legally protected than anyone expected. So when Sharon insists the police should handle Matt, the haunting question becomes painfully obvious: handle what exactly? Right now, Matt Clark is technically an amnesiac man facing unproven accusations from another state. And if the Newman family crosses the line and attacks him, especially if Nick assaults him during one of his opioid-fueled breakdowns, Matt could actually become the one pressing charges against them. That possibility changes everything. It opens the door for Matt Clark to remain permanently woven into Genoa City's future, whether the Newmans like it or not. Even if Phyllis betrays him by handing him over to Victor, there's every reason to believe Matt would eventually forgive her, especially if she walked away richer and freer afterward. And perhaps that is exactly where the story becomes truly dangerous. Phyllis Summers has always needed passion in her life, needed excitement, needed someone reckless enough to stand beside her while the rest of the city judged her choices. Most sensible men in Genoa City know better than to get involved with her anymore. But Matt Clark is not sensible. Matt Clark is broken, unpredictable, and potentially just as morally damaged as Phyllis herself. That creates the kind of chemistry soap operas live for. There is also the terrifying possibility that Matt's memories may eventually return and that he could secretly pretend to remain amnesiac, manipulating everyone around him while hiding behind sympathy and confusion. Or perhaps the amnesia becomes permanent, transforming him into an entirely different man than the monster people remember. Either direction keeps the character alive inside the story. Either direction gives Roger Howarth room to thrive. And yet looming over all of it is the darkest part of Matt's past: Sharon. The history between them cannot simply be erased because Matt once raped Sharon, a horrifying truth that still casts a shadow over everything connected to him. That history is the emotional landmine sitting beneath this entire storyline, the thing that makes redemption feel nearly impossible. But even here, the writers may be carefully carving out a path through the amnesia angle. If Matt genuinely cannot remember the crimes he committed, or if he only pretends not to remember, the show suddenly enters morally gray territory where viewers are forced to question identity, accountability, and redemption itself. Earlier, Matt quietly asked Phyllis a haunting question while discussing Crazy Patty Williams: "If you can't remember the crime, are you redeemable?" It was one of those moments that lingered long after the scene ended because it was obvious he was not really talking about Patty at all. He was talking about himself. He was thinking about the villain Noah accused him of being, the monster everyone says he once was, the man trapped somewhere beyond the fog in his shattered memory. And if that question continues guiding this story, then Genoa City may be heading toward one of its most explosive emotional disasters yet. Because suddenly the possibility no longer feels impossible. Phyllis Summers and Matt Clark could become the next twisted romance at the center of Genoa City. A woman addicted to chaos and a man trapped between villainy and reinvention crashing into each other like gasoline meeting fire. But even worse than that, there may be another wildcard waiting in the wings. Patty Williams. The mere idea of a Phyllis, Matt, and Patty triangle sounds like pure madness, the kind of emotionally unstable collision that could rip through Genoa City like a hurricane. Old obsessions, buried trauma, manipulation, jealousy, and revenge would all explode together in ways nobody could predict. And if that truly is where this story is heading, then nothing about Genoa City will ever feel safe again. As the storm surrounding Matt Clark continued building, the emotional fault lines across Genoa City began cracking wider with every passing day, and nowhere was that tension more dangerous than inside the Newman family itself. Victor Newman could sense the disaster coming long before anyone else fully understood it because beneath all the scheming and bargaining, he recognized something deeply unstable growing inside his son. Nick Newman was no longer operating on logic or restraint. The opioids had wrapped themselves around his judgment like poison vines, twisting grief, rage, and obsession into something reckless enough to destroy lives. Every conversation about Matt seemed to push Nick closer to the edge, and even though he insisted he was trying to regain control, his actions told a far more frightening story. He moved through Genoa City with the simmering fury of a man convincing himself violence was justice. And the more people warned him not to act, the more determined he became to prove he alone could end this nightmare. Victor saw it clearly, Adam saw it clearly. Even Phyllis understood that Nick was becoming unpredictable enough to turn this entire situation catastrophic. Yet despite all the warnings, the momentum toward confrontation kept accelerating, like a train speeding toward a collapsed bridge no one could stop in time. At the center of that chaos sat Matt himself, isolated inside the GCAC room where Phyllis had hidden him away from the world. The strange thing was that the more time Phyllis spent around him, the harder it became to fully reconcile the broken man before her with the monster everyone described. Matt's confusion felt painfully real. There were moments when he looked genuinely frightened by the gaps in his own memory, as though pieces of his identity had been ripped away and replaced with accusations he could barely comprehend. And Phyllis, despite all her manipulation, began responding to that vulnerability in ways she likely never expected. She understood damaged people because she herself had spent years surviving inside emotional wreckage, constantly rebuilding her life after betrayal, humiliation, and self-destruction. In Matt, she may have started seeing something dangerous, and not just leverage, but connection. Their conversations carried a strange emotional intimacy, especially when Matt spoke about redemption and whether a person could ever escape the sins of a forgotten past. Those moments did not feel like strategy anymore. They felt personal. And for Phyllis Summers, personal feelings are often the beginning of very bad decisions. The deeper Matt's storyline expanded, the more it became clear that Genoa City itself was starting to split into opposing camps. Some saw Matt as a predator who deserved punishment no matter what condition he was in. Others questioned whether an amnesiac man could truly be judged as the same person he once was. Sharon Newman remained emotionally trapped in the middle of that conflict because no matter what legal loopholes existed or what memories Matt claimed not to possess, the pain tied to him was real. Trauma does not disappear simply because the person who caused it forgets what they did. Every mention of Matt reopened wounds Sharon had spent years trying to survive, and the possibility of him remaining in town threatened to drag those scars back into the light all over again. Yet the legal system offered little comfort. Without evidence, without witnesses, without concrete proof connecting Matt to crimes in Genoa City, everything rested on emotion and memory, and emotion is not enough to convict someone in court. That reality frustrated Sharon, infuriated Nick, and quietly empowered Matt in ways nobody fully realized yet. Meanwhile, Phyllis found herself standing at the crossroads of survival and temptation. On one side was safety. Hand Matt over, secure her freedom, reclaim financial stability, and walk away clean. On the other side was something infinitely more dangerous. Curiosity. Because despite everything she knew about him, despite the warnings and history surrounding his name, there was a magnetic unpredictability about Matt Clark that Phyllis could not ignore. He challenged her in ways most men no longer could. He was damaged enough to understand her darkness, but mysterious enough to keep her intrigued. And for someone like Phyllis, boredom has always been more terrifying than danger. The possibility of her falling into another toxic romance felt almost inevitable, especially as the walls closed in around them both. Genoa City thrives on forbidden chemistry, and every scene between Phyllis and Matt seemed to carry the quiet pulse of something combustible waiting to ignite. Behind all of it lingered the growing suspicion that Matt himself might not be as lost as he appeared. Tiny cracks occasionally surfaced in his behavior, fleeting expressions that suggested more awareness than he let others see. Sometimes his confusion seemed too carefully timed. Sometimes his questions felt less innocent and more probing, as though he were testing the emotional weaknesses of everyone around him. If Matt truly had regained pieces of his memory and was hiding it, then the entire game changed instantly. Suddenly, he would no longer be the helpless man caught between powerful enemies. He would become a strategist hiding behind vulnerability, manipulating sympathy while carefully studying the people hunting him. And if that is the direction this story is heading, then Phyllis may be walking straight into another devastating betrayal without even realizing it. Yet perhaps the cruelest part is that she might not care. Phyllis has always been drawn to danger even when she knows it could destroy her. As whispers of Matt and Phyllis potentially growing closer spread through Genoa City, the idea alone threatened to send shockwaves through every corner of town. For the Newmans, it would feel like unforgivable betrayal. For Sharon, it would be deeply disturbing. For Nick, already unstable and emotionally spiraling, it could become the final trigger pushing him completely over the edge. And perhaps that is exactly why the storyline feels so explosive right now. Every emotional thread connects back to someone already carrying pain, addiction, rage, or unresolved trauma. One wrong move could unravel everything. One impulsive decision could lead to violence no one can undo. Nick's obsession with protecting his family and destroying Matt has already blurred into something frighteningly personal, and if he catches even a glimpse of growing intimacy between Matt and Phyllis, there is no telling how far he might go. The danger is no longer just legal or emotional anymore. It feels physical now, immediate and volatile. And then there is Patty Williams, the unpredictable ghost waiting just outside the edges of this story. Even the mention of Patty's name changes the atmosphere instantly because nothing involving her has ever remained sane for very long. Patty's history of obsession, instability, and emotional chaos makes her the perfect wild card to throw into an already combustible situation. If Matt enters her orbit while growing closer to Phyllis, the result could become one of the most unhinged triangles Genoa City has seen in years. Patty has always craved emotional attachment in dangerous ways, and Matt's vulnerability combined with his darkness could easily pull her toward him. At the same time, Patty and Phyllis sharing any kind of romantic rivalry would be catastrophic. Neither woman backs down, neither woman plays fair, and both are capable of emotional destruction when pushed too far. The thought of those personalities colliding around a man like Matt Clark feels less like a romance storyline and more like a psychological time bomb waiting to detonate. As all these pieces continue moving into place, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. Matt Clark was never meant to be a temporary villain passing through Genoa City. The clues are everywhere now, the extended filming, the behind-the-scenes teases, the emotional layers being built around his amnesia, the chemistry with Phyllis, the legal ambiguity protecting him. The writers are planting roots for something much larger, something designed to keep Matt embedded deep inside the city's future, whether anyone likes it or not. And if Roger Howarth truly remains on canvas long-term, then Matt may become the kind of character who constantly destabilizes the Newmans from within, not through brute force, but through emotional manipulation, shifting loyalties, and psychological warfare. He could become the wound the Newman family can never fully close. In the end, perhaps the most chilling part of all this is the uncertainty surrounding who Matt Clark really is now. Is he a monster pretending to be broken? A damaged man searching for redemption? A manipulator using amnesia as a weapon? Or someone genuinely transformed by trauma and memory loss into a different version of himself? Genoa City does not yet know the answer. Neither does Phyllis. But as she drifts closer toward him, pulled by danger, loneliness, and temptation, the city edges toward another emotional disaster that feels destined to leave destruction behind. Because in Genoa City, the most dangerous stories are never about good versus evil. They are about damaged people convincing themselves they can survive each other.